I have some not very breaking news for you. The Liberal Party is in trouble. But just how bad is their current situation? Well, the long and short is, the Liberals might not just lose government, they could see one of their worst showings in party history. And part of this worst ever showing could be ending up not even being the second place party, rather than third or even fourth. The polls have also shown a less than ideal situation for the NDP, with them seemingly in a position to make very minimal gains or even lose seats, which almost never happens in an election in which the Liberals lose seats. So that leaves only one more party to plausibly finish second. Poll aggregator website Polywave predicts that if an election were held today, the Bloc Quebecois would win second place, and fairly well-acclaimed 338 shows the Liberals only 2 seats ahead of the Bloc. A Quebec separatist party that only runs candidates in one province as the second place party? How would this happen? What would it look like? Let's talk about it. So let's understand something. This has happened before. In 1993, the Bloc Quebecois formed the official opposition when the Progressive Conservative government under Kim Campbell got crushed from 160 seats to only 2 seats, and the Liberals under Jean Chrétien were swept into power. Quebec separatist sentiment grew exponentially in Quebec after the failures of the Meech Lake Accord, and when the Bloc was formed after a couple of PC and Liberal MPs left their parties to make the party. In the campaign, the PCs and the new Western interest-based Reform Party split the vote in a way that helped the Liberals and the rest of Canada, but the BQ's ability to win almost half the votes in Quebec caused them to have just a few more seats than Reform and be second place. Here's some technical information. For all of those monolinguals out there who only speak English, watching Question Period could become a little bit more, well, annoying. Bloc Quebecois MPs only speak French on the House floor, so as such, this would be an opposition which would only pose questions in French to the government, and the government that would likely end up answering more questions in French.
Je ne pense pas que le français soit ennuyeux, mais certaines personnes pourraient être ennuyées de ne pas comprendre entièrement la période des questions et les procédures de la Chambre des communes.
And also, the official opposition would not be one that would engage in the same types of debates as the previous oppositions. They would focus much more on Quebec-centric issues as opposed to other ones. When Bloc MPs ask questions in the House, and when you see how they behaved in opposition in the 90s, a lot of their questions were worded in a way that asked about how something would affect or what it means for Quebecers and Canadians.
Will the Minister of Finance assume the responsibility that he must take on in order to better equalize the tax system for Quebecers and Canadians?
Everything I've just mentioned is largely procedural. This could also concretely affect Canada when you consider that chances are that in 2026, if the polls stay the way they are, Quebec could be very well in for a Parti Québécois majority government. The PQ have held government 3 times, and in 2 of those terms were referendums on Quebec's sovereignty, one in 1980 and one in 1995. So who's to say that if the PQ win a majority government in 2026, that they won't have a 3rd referendum, and if Pierre Poilievre is Prime Minister during the referendum, he would be the first Conservative Prime Minister to have a referendum happen under his premiership. And this is important, as the Conservative Party is not as popular in Quebec as the Liberal or Bloc Québécois parties are. And why this matters is because if Quebec has a Prime Minister in Ottawa that is less popular than the previous referendum time Prime Ministers, that could hurt the pro-Canada side of the referendum and leave Federalist voters less inspired to go and vote to remain in Canada. And Quebec voting to leave would also just be a total mess, because we would have to decide if A, Canada would even let them leave and recognize the referendum results, B, work with the provinces to make a constitutional amendment to allow Quebec to leave Canada, or C, new negotiations with the rest of Canada. The last referendum only failed by just over 1% of the voters, and it was in a situation with a Bloc opposition in Ottawa after a crushing defeat for the governing party and the separatist government in power in Quebec. So overall, while Quebec leaving Canada isn't likely, if the polls are to be believed, the Bloc-forming opposition would likely result in a new monumental change in the Canadian political climate, and would add another fire for Pierre Poilievre to put out. But what do you think? Do you think the Bloc Quebecois will be the second place party? Do you want them to be the second place party? Talk about it in the comments. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as that helps me out a lot. But apart from that, have a good rest of your day and see you. Boing. Boing.
That's my line.
Boing.
There's no place like Target to shop everything wicked.